My name is Mark Krumpautic. I'm going to preside over the Technical Advisory Committee meeting as the immediate past chair of the committee. And then when we get to item number 3 on the agenda, election of a chair, and when the committee acts on the election of the chair, I'll turn the meeting over to the new chair of the committee. To start off with, I would ask Mr. Ginnan to call roll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Krumpautic. For the record, Russell Ginnan, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Council Bureau, acting as staff per statute to the Technical Advisory Committee. Susan Brown.
Here.
Andrew Klinger.
Here.
Sarah Kaufman.
Here.
Jeff Hardcastle.
Here. Here.
I got you. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Mark Krumpautic.
Here.
David Schmidt.
Here.
And Mary Walker.
Here.
Okay. Mr. Krumpautic, let the record show that all members are present.
Thank you, Mr. Ginnan. I would move on to item number 2, public comment, and request the assistance of our broadcast staff to accept and channel through public comment to the committee.
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 3, election of a chair and vice chair. I'm going to take election of the chair first and let the new chair preside over the election of the vice chair. So at this time, I'll accept motions for a chair of the Technical Advisory Committee.
Mr. Chairman, this is Sarah Kaufman. I would recommend Susan Brown as the chairman of the committee.
Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that. This is Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Klinger. I have a first from Ms. Kaufman and a second from Andrew Klinger. With that, I would ask Mr. Ginnan to take the vote of the election of the chair, Susan Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Krumpautic. So the calling the roll call vote then. I will assume that Ms. Brown will be abstaining. So Mr. Klinger?
Yes.
Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Hardcastle?
Yes.
Mr. Krumpautic?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ms. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Krumpautic, let the record show that the vote was unanimous for with Ms. Brown abstaining on the vote for her as chairman of the Technical Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much. At this time, I will turn the meeting over to our new chair, Susan Brown. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. And with that, I would entertain a motion to nominate Sarah Kaufman for vice chair.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
David Schmidt, I'll second.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, then I missed who was the first. Was that Mr. Klinger?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. And then the second was Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought, but just for the virtual public record here, I want to make sure we're getting it. And so, Madam Chair, then with the motion, the first made by Mr. Klinger and the motion made, the second made by Mr. Schmidt, if you'd like, I can call the roll then for the motion for Ms. Kaufman as Vice Chair of the Technical Advisory Committee.
Yes, will you please take the roll call?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brown,
Yes?
Mr. Klinger,
Yes.
we'll have it show that Ms. Kaufman is abstaining from this vote. Mr. Hardcastle,
Yes.
Mr. Kapati,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Walker.
Yes.
Madam Chair, let the record show that the vote was unanimous with Ms. Kaufman abstaining on the vote for her as Vice Chair of the Technical Advisory Committee.
Thank you. So moving to item 5, review and approval of revenue forecasts for the selected general fund sources, including taxes, licenses, fees, fines, and other revenue for presentation to the Economic Forum at the Economic Forum's November 10th, 2020 meeting. I would note that there are a couple of handouts that have been provided to the committee members. And I am going to ask Mr. Ginden to provide a little background information on the Technical Advisory Committee in terms of its duties and responsibilities and the instructions provided by the Economic Forum at its meeting that took place on October 15th.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, if we could just back up, we have agenda item 4, which is approval of the minutes.
My apologies. I'll back up. Approval. Can I get a motion on approval of the meeting minutes from the April 24th, 2019 meeting?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I would second that. This is Sarah.
And Mr. Ginden, can you do a vote, please?
Okay, again, just to make the record clear, the first was made by,
Mr. Kompotic?
okay, that's what I thought, and the second was by Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Okay. And so then with your direction, call the roll. So Mr. Klinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hardcastle,
Yes.
Mr. Kapati,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
Abstain.
okay. Ms. Walker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kaufman,
Yes.
and Chair Brown.
Yes.
Madam Chair, let the record show that approval of the motion to approve the minutes was passed by a majority vote of the committee.
Thank you. All right. Now we'll move on to item 5, the review and approval of the revenue forecasts for the selected general fund sources, including taxes, licenses, fees, fines, and other revenue for presentation to the Economic Forum at the Economic Forum's November 10th, 2020 meeting. Again, everybody should have handouts that were provided to the members, and I will ask Mr. Ginden to provide the background information on the Technical Advisory Committee in terms of its duties and responsibilities and the instructions provided by the Economic Forum at its meeting that took place on October 15th. Mr. Ginden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Russell Ginden, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of Legislative Council Bureau. The Technical Advisory Committee to the Economic Forum, and it's actually by statute called the Technical Advisory Committee on Future State Revenues. And both of those are relatively long, so we generally refer to this body as the TAC. And so the TAC was created along with the creation of the Economic Forum in 1993 legislation. The TAC statutorily is the supporting body to the Economic Forum. In fact, the Technical Advisory Committee is actually established in NRS 353.229. And it specifically says that the TAC shall provide all assistance requested by the Economic Forum. And so for those that are familiar with this, but those that may be listening that aren't, the Economic Forum had a meeting per statute in June of 2020. They had one in the middle of October. And at those meetings, members of the Economic Forum are asked to provide direction or request any assistance from the TAC at those meetings. And so at those meetings, they directed the staff to the forum to work with as staff to the TAC to consider the forecast for what we call the minor general fund revenue sources that this body will be hearing and considering today. and then approve this preliminary general fund revenue forecast for their consideration at their meeting. That will be next Tuesday, November 10th. And again, I think it's important to point out that these are preliminary forecasts, and we'll be doing this again in late November in preparation for the Economic Forums meeting on December 3rd. So that's basically the duties of the TAC, which is to provide any assistance requested. And that has historically been exactly the exercise that we'll be going to today, which is having the minor consensus general fund revenue forecast presented to you. And then you'll see the two agenda items, the one of which has been alluded to by the chair, that will require action by this committee. And so with that, Madam Chair, if that addresses the information that you requested, and I can answer any questions that the chair or the members of the committee may have.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Are there any other questions from any of the other members? Seeing none. Would you like to go ahead, Russell, with item number 5?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'd first like to do before I get into the handouts that the chair has referenced is the handouts are available on the following web address. And this gets into the staffing that's provided between the budget office and the fiscal analysis division to the TAC versus the Economic Forum. And I should have pointed out that under the statutory provisions for the Economic Forum and the TAC, that the Legislative Council Bureau and the Budget Division are jointly required to provide the staffing and meeting resources to both bodies. So we attempt to split those between the two agencies. So the TAC material that I'll be talking about here in a second is available at the following web address for those that may be listening. It's at budget.nv.gov/meetings/budget_division. And so again, that is budget.nv.gov/meetings/budget_division. And there you'll find the agenda for the meeting as well as the 3 handouts that I'll next be referencing. So what you should have available to you that was submitted electronically to you by email, and is again also available at the website that I just referenced, you have what's labeled the Technical Advisory Committee table, or the TAC table. And so that is, it's titled at the top, Technical Advisory Committee - General Fund Revenue Forecast - November 10, 2020. You should also have available to you a document that's titled Table 3. This is the document that actually lists for each of the revenue sources that the Economic Forum has requested that the TAC prepare a preliminary forecast for their consideration at their meeting next week. The forecast that's prepared by the agency, then the one that is prepared by the Budget Division, and the one prepared by the Fiscal Analysis Division. And I'll just pause here for a second to go. The process that we use to go through this is that in September, we make a request to all the executive branch agencies responsible for administering these specific revenue sources, or they end up, because of performing their statutory duties, they collect revenues required to be deposited in a general ledger account that belongs to one of these revenue sources that is deposited in the state general fund. So we make that request to them to provide us their forecast for FY21, FY22, and FY23. That is the information that's listed in the table under the agency forecast. Then budget and fiscal staff prepare their own independent forecasts, and you see those listed respectively in those columns of the table. Then the table that I first referenced is the consensus forecast that budget staff and fiscal staff look through the 3 different forecasts and then make a decision to put a forecast in the TAC table for this body's consideration. So then with that, the third table that's been provided for your consideration in case references needed to it, it's called Table 1. FY 2018 through FY 20 and FY 21 versus FY 20 year-to-date through October. So you can see that this table shows you the actual collections for all revenue sources, not just the minor general fund revenue sources that this body is considering for FY 2018, FY 2019, and FY 2020. And then in the green column, it shows you the year-to-date for FY 2020 and the year-to-date through FY 2021. And we show this through October. But it's worth pointing out here that when you look to this table, the majority of these revenue sources are deposited into the state controller system on a monthly basis, but some of them are actually paid and then distributed to the general fund on a quarterly basis. But the information here would be reflective of through October 31st, 2020, in the same time period through October 2019, or to have the apples. So for those revenue sources that they're being deposited very frequently, it would be through October. But for the several of the other revenue sources, there may only be information available through September or even through August. And that would be specific to the ones that the monthly revenue sources administered by the Department of Taxation. At this point in time in the fiscal year, they've just, by law for the revenue sources that they're administering, have been collected and then reported through the business activity period of August. So with that then, Madam Chair, I'm going to try and bring up here, so if you bear with me a second and share my screen. I'll bring up the TAC table just to try and put that in front of all of us. And if need be, I can bring up the other ones, but I'll have to swap between them. So I would ask that those that have the video capabilities, you can see the TAC table available to you. Okay, I see nodding of heads, so I'll take that as the affirmative. So again, so as I stated, this table is showing you the forecast that for your consideration this afternoon that was decided upon as a consensus between staff and the budget office and the fiscal analysis division after each of us were preparing our own forecast, as well as the agency forecasts that I referenced that are in table 3. So generally, I'm not going to go through every one of these revenue sources. Some of them are relatively de minimis, but I will go through those that I think are some of the larger ones, but also those that do deserve time to go through what's driving the revenue source in the forecast. So starting with that, at the top of the page is the net proceeds of minerals. And this is the tax that, right, it's on as stated, the net proceeds from the mining operations by all mining, just not gold, that occurs in the state that is subject to the net proceeds of minerals tax. And the state general fund gets a portion of the rate that's statutorily required to be imposed on the mining operation. And that the tax rate depends on the ratio of their net to gross, but also there's provisions based on the amount of net proceeds that you can have determines the rate. The portion that belongs to the state general fund is the difference between the rate that's required to be paid by the mining operation less the combined property tax rate that's in place in the tax district in which that mine operates. So for example, for the vast majority of the gold mining operations, they're paying the constitutional maximum 5% rate. So if the property tax rate in the tax district in which the mine is operating is 3%, then 2% of that 5% rate is required to be deposited in the state general fund. So that's the mechanism of the tax at a very high level. Why you see the big jump in FY21 and then it go back down in 22, this is one of the revenues that had an action for revenue enhancement approved during the 31st special session of the legislature. And that action was to require an advance payment to be made in FY21 based on the estimate for calendar year 21. This tax under the law before the passage in 31st special session, the net proceeds is always based on the actual net proceeds from the preceding calendar year paid in the fiscal year. But for the state general fund rate portion only, based on the actions approved in the 31st special session, in FY21, we will receive that payment based on the actual for calendar year 2020, plus an estimate made by the mines for what they will do for calendar year 21, and then make that payment. So thus in FY21, we received two payments. The actual based on the preceding calendar year and the estimated for the current calendar year. And thus in FY 2022, they're required to do an estimate for calendar year 2022 and make that payment, plus we'll true up against their estimate for calendar year 21. Then it's the same thing for FY 23. Estimate for FY 23, true up against the actual for calendar year 2022. So thus based on, and the forecast for this revenue source, the agency is the Department of Taxation. They prepared a forecast, and then budget and fiscal staff did. And the forecast that you see here presented to you in the TAC table is the average of the taxation, fiscal, and budgets forecast for all 3 years. And so then out of that comes the additional payment in FY21 is worth approximately $62.4 million of the 120, basically the 130 million that you see on the sheets for FY21. So, Madam Chair, that was the information that I wanted to present on this revenue source. I can pause here to see if there's any questions, or if you'd just like me to go through everything and then see if there's questions at the end.
Thank you. Do members have any questions about the net proceeds of minerals?
Okay.
Seeing none? Do you want to continue?
I will proceed. Thank you, Madam Chair. The next block, I'll just point out there, under the gaming-state, it's all the various device taxes or licensing fees that the Gaming Control Board is required to collect from or impose upon the state's licensed gaming industry. And that would be both for the restricted and the non-restricted operating locations. The forecasts you see in the table here are the ones that were developed by the Gaming Control Board and submitted to fiscal and budget. And then we had conversations with Mr. Lawton, who prepared these at the Gaming Control Board. And we were comfortable going with his forecast. So what you see in here for all those revenue sources is the Gaming Control Board's forecast. I think you can appreciate, and I probably should have started off here, that all of us know, some of us more than others, as I look at the faces on the screen, that forecasting is a difficult exercise at times. It's particularly difficult in a thing called a pandemic. I think for all these revenue sources, it's difficult, some more than others. And so you can see when you look at the device taxes, you're having to make assumptions about how you think devices will start to be brought back online by the gaming operators. And so Mr. Lawton, as he made his analysis and his forecasts and then went through that information with us, we feel these are a reasonable estimate of what to expect from these revenue sources for each of the next 3 years. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll move on to the next one that I did want to address, just mention, and then don't have a lot to say, but you see then it's Gl3053, the Transportation Connection Excise Tax. Many of you may know this is the Uber or Lyft tax. It was the tax approved during the 2015 session. It's the 3% tax on the amount charged for the fare by transportation network companies. It is worth pointing out that the tax is not just applicable to Uber and Lyft operators. It also applies to taxi cabs as well as other motor carriers that are in the business of transporting passengers. And so what you can see here is not to be surprised that for those of you that have been around the TAC, that when you look at some of the revenue forecasts, you're seeing more variance than you probably historically have seen for some of these smaller revenue sources. And this one is possibly one of them. And so the forecast that you see in the tag table is the average of all three. So thus, by averaging all three, we're putting 1/3 weight on each one of the forecasts. And so when we looked at that average, it seemed to be a reasonable, in some sense, the proverbial splitting the baby, as probably a reasonable forecast. When you look at the forecast in the agency fiscal budget sheet, you can see the variance that's there, but then when you average it, it is probably landing in something that we felt reasonable, given the alternate forecast presented. Next, at the bottom of that page is Gl3052, the cigarette tax. Again, you see some variance there. And thus the forecast in the tables for you is the average of the agency fiscal budget. And here again, the agency is the Department of Taxation that administers this tax. This is actually, this tax is always somewhat difficult for us, but it's probably got more difficulty because, right, you expect it to somewhat be tied to your visitors, that some percentage of them that we bring here are smokers, even though smoking as a per capita thing has been declining. But like many time series, they're getting beat up by the March, April, May, June, July, August, September pandemic event. And this one was very peculiar for us as taxation, fiscal, and budget staff. When you see June 2020 ended up being over 15 million, that was the highest month for FY 2020. In fact, it was the highest, it was the fourth highest month in the last 24 months. So that was pretty unexpected to think that when, right, in June, and I don't think you can contribute, if you attribute all of that increase to, hey, the partial reopening in June of the casinos and the economy, right? So clearly that series has even more variance in it than I think we're seeing. And all we have is the first 2 months of FY 2021, and it's been averaging somewhere around about $12.1 million a month. So then when you look at that and see the forecast, if you annualize somewhere between 12 million a month to $12.5 million a month, you're going to get anywhere between 144 and $150 million as a forecast. And thus, when we took the average of it, we felt comfortable. That's trying to hedge the bet between the three different forecasts that were prepared. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll move on. And so I'll move on to my table. So you can skip the second page. That's the modified business tax. And that's a major that's actually handled by the Economic Forum. And then the top half of the third page is still the MBT and the insurance premium tax, which the insurance premium tax is also handled by the Economic Forum. So you can just see there's the two insurance, the retaliatory tax, captive insurance, and the forecasts that are there are the average of the fiscal and budget forecasts. Then the next one that I wanted to discuss a little bit was GL3051, the governmental services tax, otherwise known as the GST. And this is the general fund / highway fund portion that comes out of the legislative action from the 2009 session. And so in FY 2020, based on 2019 legislative actions and then approved by the governor, it was 25% of the proceeds that belong to the state's portion of the GST go to the general fund, 75% goes to the highway fund. During the 31st special session, the legislature passed and the governor signed the action to require 100% of the state's portion of the governmental services taxes to be deposited in the general fund. Thus, that's why you see going from 21.3 million in FY 2020 to a forecast of 93.1 million for FY 21. Then, under the current law, the state portion of the GST is supposed to go back to 25% going to the general fund and 75% going back to the highway fund. Thus, you see it fall back down to in the low $20 million range. And so, again, the forecast that you see here is the average of the fiscal and budget forecasts. As we looked at it, we were not comfortable with fiscal and budget having weight given to the agency's forecast. So here, there's 50% weight to the fiscal, 50% weight to the budget forecast as the average of those two. Then you can see you have the business license fee, the liquor tax, but what I thought was worth taking the time to mention here was the other tobacco tax, or the OTP tax, as we refer to it. The OTP tax is a revenue source that is being affected by legislative action from the 2019 session, when a bill was passed to expand the application of the 30% of wholesale value tax to vaping and alternative nicotine products. That tax change became effective January 1st, 2020. And so thus what you can see is it would affect the last 6 months of FY 2020 and all 12 months of FY 2021. So you have those two fiscal years that you really don't have an apples to apples. And it really isn't until FY 2022 that you have 12 months of FY 2022 comparable to the 12 months of FY 2021 in terms of having the same statutory tax structure in place. We saw this tax basically with the tax becoming effective January before the effect of the virus on March and going forward, that it was probably increasing somewhere around 85% to 65, 70%, which was probably a little better than was anticipated when we were working through this during session. And then obviously the data went sideways on us due to the effect of the pandemic. And so now we see it starting to come back fairly strong here in July and August, the first 2 months of FY 21. So that would be the information set in some sense that each of the three forecasters, the Department of Taxation and the agency and budget fiscal, would have available to them. So then the forecast that you see there after looking at all three is the average of all three forecasts that's shown there in the sheet. And because we thought that ended up being a reasonable path, that you get the strength of 21 because of the 6 months of that annual before it annualizes against FY 2020, and actually FY 2020 being stronger than 2019 because of the tax change, but it actually ended up being weaker than was expected because of the impact of the pandemic. And so with that, Madam Chair, that was the items that I wanted to cover on this section, which is what we label as the taxes. So if there's questions on any of these taxes, I could stop here and go through. Otherwise, I will proceed to the next page of the table.
Are there any questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do have a couple questions, if I may.
Ms.
This is
Walker, go
Mary.
ahead.
This is Mary. A couple of things, just in general, when, and I'll use the Transportation Excise Tax as an example. So we're projecting a decrease of 22% in 2021, and then an increase of 18% in 2022. And by the time you hit 2023, it's a 52% increase. So in general terms, are we projecting that the state is going to pretty much rebound by 2023? How is that economic flow? How do you guys see that economic flow when we get out of the pandemic? You know, and as our business activity increases, is that in general what you guys are looking at?
Madam Chair, this is Russell Gendon with the Fiscal Division. And Ms. Walker, before I actually attempt to answer your question actually made me realize that I should have pointed out on this revenue source that the first $5 million of every biennium goes to the state highway fund, which is why you see it go down in 22 and then come back up even more. So if you want to try and get more apples to apples, add 5 million to 2020 and 2022. And then, so you'll see it would have been around 25 million and then drops down to 15 and goes up to around 23 million and then 28 million. So I apologize for not including that, but thankfully for Ms. Walker's question, it made me realize I did not. So now to get to your question, I can only speak for the Fiscal Division, but for us, I think we're looking at what a lot of people are trying to say, which is the potential for the vaccine to be out in the first end of the first, beginning of the second quarter of next calendar year. And then the harder part is when maybe you'll have mass vaccination. And as you know, for Nevada, it's not just by vaccination of Nevada residents, it's also the non-Nevadans, so we can get them here as visitors. And then, so then the path for us is that probably going to, stay a little flat through at least the end of 2021, and then possibly start to pick up. And then as you go into 22 and then 23, and thus you can see by the end of 23, then we're above where we were in 2020. But I'm trying to look at the sheet here. In 2019, it was 30 million actually in FY 2019. So we're not quite back to the peak in a sense, if you think of 2019 being the peak.
Okay, and then on the business license fee, the revenues are pretty flat for a couple of years on the projection. And my question would be, are we seeing businesses close down and a lower number of businesses actually paying that fee? Do we have any kind of information on how many businesses have closed down and are no longer paying that fee? I'm just wondering. I just would have expected it that instead of that being flat, there would have been more of a decline in our business license fees, just based on more businesses closing.
Again, Madam Chair, Russell again, for the record with the fiscal division, that you're correct that the revenue forecasts are relatively flat. Maybe to provide a little bit more context of what all goes into this, that it is the business license fee. And so under this one, it's $500 for C Corps, corporations, and then it's $200 for non-corps. And then also under the law, all the transportation connection excise tax drivers, they're supposed to have a business license fee. So as staff from, I think, fiscal and the agency and budget are trying to think through this, we do get data from the Secretary of State's office on the corporations and the non-corporation filings. And we look at that data, but it's sometimes hard to go, well, are we losing businesses due to the pandemic and the economic event? Or could it be entities are choosing to file their C Corps because of the $500 in other states, or even just choosing to form their business in another state? And then what we've, myself personally wondered, well, what is going on with the Uber Lyft drivers? Are you deciding to pay your $200? And also remember, the business license fee is due at the end of the month of your anniversary month. So for those people that were businesses that renew their business license would have been in that March, April, May, June, July, right? They might have been the ones more having to go, well, do I pay my $200 or my $500 to keep my business license? Or no, I'm not going to because of what's going on. Versus those that have anniversary dates that weren't in those periods, they may have to make the same decision going forward here if without additional stimulus or if the economy doesn't pick up. So I know that's probably an obtuse way of attempting to answer your question, but the answer is that, do we have definitive information on businesses opening and closing? No, we can look at the data that the Secretary of State has and sort of try and look at how did that compare to the prior months in the same month a year ago, and use that information to try and guess at what might be going on with businesses making a decision to say, well, I'm going to try and ride this out. Thus, I'll pay my $200 to keep my sole proprietor or my LLP or my LLC license. And then I think the one for us is we did see this revenue source become a little more robust with the passage of the TNC, the Transportation Connection, and I think a little bit more compliance with the drivers getting the BLF. So I think that will be the interesting thing to watch is, will there be some degradation in it as we continue to see the actuals? And I think the good thing is, Ms. Walker, that we'll get another month's worth of information, and we can take that into consideration when we come back to you at the end of this month.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Do you have any other questions, Ms. Walker?
No, that was it.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you. You may or may not be the one to answer this, but the advanced license fees, it looks like there's a big one-time event in FY 2022, and I was wondering if you or someone from Gaming Control Board could talk about that.
Mr. Lawton, I'll attempt to answer it, and then if I don't get it right, please feel free to jump in, because Mr. Lawton provided both the budget office and the fiscal analysis division as we went through this. And again, just to go through so you have the context, the advanced license fee is when a new property opens or there's a change in ownership that would necessitate the advanced license fee being made. So after your first full months of business being in operation, given the amount of tax you owe on those operations from the gaming percentage fee tax, you're required to make a treble payment or 3 times that amount. That's the advanced license fee payment. And what the advanced license fee payment does is actually primes the estimated fee adjustment mechanism for the gaming percentage fee tax. And so why you see it go up in 22 is the assumption that Resorts World will open in summer of 2021, which would be in FY 2022.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other
Are
questions?
there any additional questions?
Madam Chair, I have,
Ms. Kaufman has a
Ms.
question.
Kaufman?
and Mr. Ginnan, this may be for the Department of Taxation, but it shows on the report that in 2021 is the $14 million in the tax amnesty program. And I was wondering if that has actually been implemented, and if so, how much we've actually received to date on that.
Madam Chair, I can state that as fiscal staff, the amnesty program, and I appreciate Ms. Kaufman bringing that because I skipped over it. This was one that just, and this will give Ms. Young a chance to prepare her response. So the tax amnesty was another action from the 31st special session and the law that was approved requires the Department of Taxation to implement a tax amnesty program on or before the end of June 30th, 2021. And the program can be run for no longer than 90 days. And so that's the provisions. And so the estimates that you see in here are it's still the same number that Ms. Young and her staff worked with fiscal and budget staff during the 31st special session to come up with this estimate of $14 million. And that came out of looking at when the state ran amnesty programs back during the Great Recession, and looking at sort of what came in, but understanding that this is no Great Recession that's going on. But we felt comfortable as the 3 agencies that the 14 million is an estimate. And so with that, Ms. Young, I'll allow you to answer the other additional part of Ms. Kaufman's question.
Thank you. This is Melanie Young. And to answer your question, we don't have a specific date or tax amnesty yet. And it's due to, in part, about 3 different things that we're working towards. For the department to feel the amnesty program would be successful, we're working to implement credit cards. Credit cards was piloted last month, but we did run into a technical difficulty that we're working through. So we anticipate credit cards for some of the tax types to be fully implemented this week. The rest of the tax types that will be coming soon. The second part of that was our goal was to automate this program, much like back in the previous recession 10 years ago, we handled this program manually, which became a great, large burden to the department. So we wanted to automate this so the taxpayers could apply online. So with those 2 factors, we're still working on those details. We feel that those will be finalized soon. And then the third part is, hopefully looking for the timing to implement this program so that businesses could be have the resources that they would need to pay the taxes that were due prior to. So the way the bill was written, it was for taxes that were due and payable prior to June 30, or prior to the bill being implemented in July. So we were looking at that date as June 30th for some tax types. And so with that, we don't have an official date. And so I'll be available for questions if there are any others.
Madam Chair, if I could follow up.
Yes, please.
Ms. Young, do you have an anticipated date on when the automation may be completed?
Melanie Young, we are hoping that it will be done within the next 45 days. We're working on that. It is in user acceptance testing through our program, project management program. So our goal is to, once we have that completed, have it through the user acceptance testing and have to where that there's no glitches with that. Our plan is to announce the opening of the program and give a 30-day to 45-day lead time through our communication plan and getting the communication out to all available resources so that we can reach as many taxpayers as possible.
Madam Chair, if I can just ask one more question. So with the 90-day span, April 1st would essentially have to be the drop dead time frame for that program to actually implement. Is that correct?
Thank you for that question. We're looking as April 2nd. So because May is it has 31 days in it, so it would be April 2nd.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, I would just add for that with regards to the provisions of the bill as passed, that it doesn't require the taxation department to run it for 90 days. It can't be more than 90 days. So I just, you'd think, well, I know Director Young will probably try and want to run it the full 90 days to maximize the potential revenue that could come out of the program. But just since it was a good question, I wanted to get that right, given the environment that we're going on, and the Director Young makes the decision that to run it for 60 days, that would be within her purview as the director, based on the way the language was structured in the bill.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any additional questions at this time?
I don't see any, Madam Chair.
I'm not seeing any either. Will you please proceed?
Thank you. So going on to the next page, which is the licenses block on the table. And so let me get the handout here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. You can see the major revenue source in the licenses section are the Secretary of State revenue sources, with the two largest ones being the commercial recordings and Gl3052 and then Gl3052 the securities. And the forecast that you see here is the average of the Secretary of State, the fiscal and the budget's forecast for all the Secretary of State's revenue sources. And in fact, for every revenue source forecast that you see in this licenses section of this part of the table is the average of the agency fiscal budget forecast. And so then under the fees and fines section, basically the same thing here, that all of the forecasts shown here are the average of the agency fiscal budget forecasts for each revenue source, except for the short-term car lease, it's the fiscal budget forecast only that was averaged over. And again, if you go look at this revenue source in table 3, you'll see like the transportation connection tax or the TNC tax, there is more variance here. This one, it is worth pointing out, although we have the first 2 months of the TNC tax, the short-term car rental tax is a quarterly tax. We will not receive the first quarter's information for FY21 until the end of this month. So we're hoping that, and this one's going to be a tight turn for the Gaming Control Board and the Department of Taxation with Thanksgiving falling late, to be able to conduct the business that they need to do and get the numbers compiled and be able to report them to fiscal and budget, as well as their own ability to take that information. But we're hoping that we'll have that actual first quarter, and then we'll get to see what the short-term car rental tax looked like for July, August, September, compared to the T&C tax for July, August, and September. And I would be honest to state that that'll be additional information. Will it be really good information to help us forecast? We won't know till we see the information and try and work through it, right? So with that, Madam Chair, that was sort of what I wanted to say. I'm not trying to belittle these revenue sources. It's just that when we work through them, they're on average a little bit more straightforward. And then as you get down to the fees and fines, other than the short-term car rental tax, a lot of those tend to be more, we call them, in the minor sections, we have minor minors and major minors. And so these are minor minors. And so if there are no questions on any of the revenue sources on that page, then I'll proceed to the next page. And I'm not seeing anybody.
Not seeing any.
Okay, so moving on to the next page. Really, the only one that's worth pointing out here is the Treasurer's Office, other than to make the statement that the other repayments section, these are all governed by statutory provisions. This is when the general fund appropriations are provided to a project, and then the appropriation is required to be paid back to the general fund on a repayment schedule dictated by the law. And so the payment amounts here are based on information provided by the budget office, and then fiscal and budget and the agency working together to get all these reconciled to tie out to the statutorily required payment amounts, as some of them were augmented by actions during before and during the 31st special session. So the Treasurer's interest income, and we have Tara Hagan with us today from the Treasurer's Office if there are any questions. What you see in the table is the Treasurer's forecast, because we after fiscal and budget looked at the information and the forecast provided by the Treasurer's Office to both of our offices. We felt comfortable going with our forecast. And we can also appreciate the difficulty of having to attempt to estimate interest income in this kind of environment. But obviously you can see the reduction in the amount of interest that's expected. And I will say, looking at the Treasurer's analysis and information they provided, obviously part of that is a reduction in the amount of general fund revenue that we would have as part of the investment portfolio base, or the money that could be in their investment funds. And then also, I think we're all familiar with what's going on with interest rates. So, and so the Treasurer's Office actually goes through and tries to look at what they think the average and investment base will be in terms of the funds. And then as they attempt to manage those funds through the different portions of the yield curve to earn the maximum amount of interest available. And so that's the forecast that's there. And I think this is, for those that have been around this for a while, and that would be Tara and I to go, we just got this up in the $20 million range again, right? The Great Recession beat it up pretty badly. And then we were able to sort of get back to where the kind of interest that we saw. And then you can see we're getting beat up again in the current economic environment. And so with that, Madam Chair, that was the statements that I wanted to make. I didn't know if there's any questions that members may have, and then it might be best for Ms. Hagan to address those.
Are there any questions from the committee?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman.
Mr. Gannon, in regards to the interest, what factors are playing into fiscal year 2021 being around 5.5 and then seeing a dip to about 4 million in 2022, and then going right back up to about 5.7 in 2023. And maybe that's a better question for the treasurer's office.
It probably would be a better, I mean, I could give you my answer from looking at the information that the treasurer's office provided, but it may be better for you to actually get it from the person who prepared the table rather than my translation of the information in that table.
Good afternoon. This is Tara Hagan with the Treasurer's Office. So in fiscal year 21, how we forecast these is we actually pull down at a certain date and time the federal fund futures contracts. So that gives us an idea of what the market is pricing in terms of the federal funds rate. But what's playing into the fiscal year 21 is obviously in our portfolio today, in the general portfolio, we have securities that we purchased during better times. And so part of that is just taking into account that we do have some securities that will be rolling off over the next few years. And so we actually had the first quarter actuals, or close anticipated for the first quarter, that we were able to plug into that. And so that's raising that a little bit. Then the future fund rates, as you go out a little bit longer into fiscal year 23, were just a little bit more than in fiscal year 22. So hopefully that answers the question.
It did. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, Madam Chair, I can proceed to the last block of that table, which is the other revenue block.
Thank you. Please proceed.
And so I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on those. You can see one of the larger revenue sources here is the expired slot machine wagering vouchers. And that is the forecast that was prepared by Mr. Lawton with the Gaming Control Board. And he called and I went through that with them, and I was comfortable with it. And that information was relayed to Ms. Powers with the budget division. And again, this is the one that was putting in place, he said, during the Great Recession as a revenue enhancement. And what it does is, just for everybody's information, because it's somewhat of a unique one, is that you probably hear them referred to a lot of times as the Tito machines, ticket out, ticket in, ticket out. So when a slot machine spits out the voucher, the ticket, if it's not redeemed within 180 days, then it basically becomes expired under the law. And then the value of that, 75% of that value is required to be transferred to the state for deposit in the state general fund. The other 25% is retained by the gaming licensee. So again, Mr. Lawton had to go through and try and take into account what was going on, and then 6 months out, what you think will be going on. And that's why you sort of see the pattern of it going down in 21, because what's going down, and then it gets stronger out in 23 than 22 because of the 6 month lag that requires to occur before the unredeemed ticket can be deemed to be expired. So then at the bottom on Gl3052 the cost recovery plan, others may know this as SWICAP. And so these are the FY21 number is the legislatively approved amount. And then as a placeholder, based on fiscal division and budget division staff talking, is to put in the FY22 and 23 number at the FY21 wedge approved. This is something that comes out of the Ms. Brown and her staff working to the governor's recommended budget. And so we will have possibly a different number for the body's consideration at the end of the month, but it is something that comes out of the governor building the executive budget. So it may or may not still be somewhat of a placeholder number at the end of this month. So, and then finally on this sheet is unclaimed property. This is the program that's run by the treasurer's office. And you can see in the sheets that this forecast is the treasurer's forecast. And there, you can see in table 3, there are the fiscal division sort of runs its own thing by looking at this revenue source, but you can see that the differences are actually pretty de minimis. So thus, budget and fiscal, when they talked to it, were comfortable going with the treasurer's estimates for this revenue source for all 3 years. And so with that, Madam Chair, that concludes the information I want to provide to this body for the revenue source items that are required to be covered under agenda item 5. And Madam Chair, I know agenda item 5 says for possible action, but if it's okay with the chair, if there are no other questions, it might just make more sense for me to proceed with agenda item 6. And then you could combine both agenda items into one action item. That way the members would have the full information set rather than having to parse it into the two as it's listed on the agenda.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gindin. That was my intent, to ask you to go through item 6 and then to make a motion for both items at the very end when those are both completed. Are there any additional questions on item 5?
I'm not hearing or seeing any.
I am not either. So would you like to move on to number 6, review and approval for forecasts for various tax credit programs that may be taken against certain general fund sources?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you allowing me to do it this way as the chair. So I'll just use the same page I'm on. And as you probably have noticed through the tables, the tax credits are shaded out in the gray area to try and make them easier to find and to keep track of. So I'm just going to go through some of these relatively quickly, and then what's going on with them, and then how they work at a high level. Is to also, just for people to understand, you see them listed all down here at the bottom, and you don't see them really listed against revenue sources. And in some of it, it's because of the nature of many of these tax credit programs. So the film transferable tax credit programs, these are the ones that are for approved film projects that they can earn tax credits, which can be used against the gaming percentage fee tax, the insurance premium tax, the modified business tax. And then they can be transferred. So if the person who actually was awarded the credits can't use them against one of those 3 revenue sources, they can transfer them to somebody that can. And so the amounts that you see on the sheet here are based on information that the film office provided, budget and fiscal, and based on conversations with staff in the film office, thought that it was comfortable based on projects that they know that are already been awarded tax credits, and thus they're out there in FY21, projects that will most likely complete because they're in post-production or they're in audit process. And then other ones that they know that are applying and in a sense are in the tube. Based on that information, we thought it was reasonable then, as budget and fiscal process that information, to put the $10 million on the sheets for FY21 and then $4 million for FY22 and $6 million for FY23. This program has a statutorily authorized maximum of $10 million per year. And I think it's just worth noting that the $10 million on the sheets for FY21, that's not necessarily coming from the authorized credits of $10 million for FY21. Because remember, you come in and you apply, you get approved, and then you go do your production, then you got post-production, and you got to do the audit. So sometimes there can be a long lag between when you come into the state, get approved for credits, and when you're actually awarded them, and then when they're taken. So this 10 million makes it look like it's tied to the 10 million authorized for 21. Some of it could occur like that in the real world, but a lot of this is coming from credits that were approved from prior fiscal years, and now they finally reached the stage that they've been awarded the credits, or they're going to be awarded the credits and taken, we believe, in FY21, again, based on the information provided to us by the film office. The economic development transferable tax credits, these were frequently referred to as the Tesla credits. You can see that this program concluded in FY 2020, thus we don't have to worry about the tax credits for this program for the FY 21 or the next biennium. The catalyst account transferable tax credits, the forecast that you see here is based on conversations that staff in the budget office and the fiscal division had with Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOED, on this program, and believe that these are the estimates that were concurred in between the 3 entities as we discussed through it for this program. Again, these are just tax credits that can be awarded to entities, and they can be used against the 3 taxes that I referenced. But if the person can't use them, then they can transfer them to somebody that can use them against the revenue source to which they were declared for use. The Nevada New Market Jobs Act tax credits. This is the one that you see that about 7.8 million was actually taken in 2020, and we have 1.8 million dollars on the sheets for FY 2021. We actually thought this is the first round or the original New Markets Jobs Act, Nevada New Markets Jobs Act program tax credits. And we thought all of them, the credits would be taken in FY 2020 and we'd be done. But there's still some of the original $116 million in tax credits that were authorized for the original program. Thus, we're placing them on the sheets for FY 21. And then the 24 million for FY 22 and FY 23 is the program was re-upped for another round in a bill during the 2019 session. So again, insurance companies are allowed to make up to $200 million in contributions to qualified community development entities, I believe is what they're called under the New Markets Jobs Act program. And then they can get up to 58% of that contribution back as tax credits. So that's that's where the $116 million in total tax credits come from. So the way the program works is that you have anniversary dates for the percentage of credits that you can earn based on your contribution. So the first 2 anniversary dates are 0% and 0%. So the first anniversary date that has non-zero value is 12%. That's for FY 2022. And in fact, to protect the state during the current biennium, the law was passed so that no tax credits can actually be taken until after July 1st, 2021. So thus, the 12% times the 200 million is the 24 million, and then it goes 12% for the 4th anniversary date. So that's what's generating the estimates of the 24 million. And generally, staff of the budget division, the fiscal division, as we're working to these tax credit programs, realize that it's hard to figure out the timing of when they may be, as I said, approved and then awarded and then taken. That can cross over multiple fiscal years. But we generally have adopted the rule and then presented them to this body as well as to the Economic Forum that we should probably be fiscally prudent and put the potential maximum amount of credits on the sheets to protect the state's general fund position from these tax credit programs, especially given the information that we have about when the stuff could occur in terms of getting approved, getting awarded, and getting taken. So then you have the educational choice scholarship tax credits. These are the ones that can only be taken against the modified business tax. And so there you see, based on the provisions from the legislation passed in the 2019 session, the max amount of statutorily authorized tax credits was $11.4 million for FY 2020 and FY 21. And then it's the 6.655 million for 2022 and 2023. That's where we have those amounts on the sheets as the amount of credits for each of those 3 fiscal years. And then you have the college savings plan tax credits. That program is one administered by the Treasurer's Department, or excuse me, the Treasurer's Office. And so these are estimates provided to us by the Treasurer's Office. It's a program that is never fully taken off as possibly anticipated. But if you go back and look at Table 1, there have been times when there have been credits taken through this program. And so based on the information and analysis done by the Treasurer's Office provided to us, we were comfortable putting this amount of tax credits on the sheets for all 3 years. And then finally, the Affordable Housing Transferable Tax Credit Program. This is the program that was approved during the 2019 session. That it's a 4-year pilot program that authorized up to $10 million in tax credits for a year, or 40 million total. And so this, based on conversations with the housing division, this is what they believe based on the information that they have in terms of project applications. And again, this is one where you don't get the credits till after you've complied with and done what's necessary. So you can be approved credits, and then, right, the affordable housing project has to be developed, brought online, and the other qualifications that are necessary to actually be awarded credits. So again, the $3 million for FY 2022 and the $10 million for FY 2023 were based on conversations that staff had with staff from the housing division. And so, Madam Chair, that was the information that I wanted to present under agenda item 6 for the tax credits. If there are any questions, I can attempt to answer those.
Thank you. Are there any questions on these tax credits?
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ginden, so just to confirm, the Governor's Office of Economic Development has projected that they will not have any tax credits related to the CALIS account for transferable taxes?
Yes, based on our conversations with them, that the way they're administering the program, that they don't believe that they'll have, now there well could be, but based on the information that they said that they had at the point in time that Budget and Fiscal were discussing this with them, it would have been in late October. This was what was comfortable based on that information set Budget and Fiscal concurring on with staff from GOED. But we did reserve that Budget and Fiscal would circle back around with them to see if there was any new information that should be taken into consideration with regards to this program. And then if there is, then we would adjust the estimates accordingly and bring that forward to the TAC at the meeting at the end of this month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I am not seeing any. So with that, I would take a motion on both the revenue forecasts and the review and approval of the various tax programs. And the motion would be to approve what was presented to the committee by Mr. Ginden. At this time, the chair would accept a motion.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Dave Schmidt.
Thank you, Dave. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Mr. Ginden, would you please take a roll call vote?
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, just so I can make sure for the public record that what this is the motion to approve under agenda items 5 and 6, the revenue forecasts that have been presented for the revenue sources as well as the tax credits that are presented in the Technical Advisory Committee table. And so with that, I will start the roll call. Mr. Klinger?
Yes.
Mr. Hardcastle?
Yes.
Mr. Kampadic?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ms. Walker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kaufman?
Yes.
Chair Brown?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously by the members of the committee.
Thank you. And just for clarification, before opening up for public comment, Mr. Ginden, we would expect to probably meet again towards the end of November.
Yes, Madam Chair. Your staff, Susanna Powers, and fiscal staff will be talking to the Department of Taxation, the Gaming Control Board, to see when they will be doing the press release for the next month. And so then we will work to see what dates are viable, and then work with you as the chair to get a date set up, working with you and the other members and their schedules. I will tell people looking at the calendar that it's probably, even if we can't get the information from the agencies, it's going to have to be possibly in that Tuesday, Wednesday before Thanksgiving. If you're willing to have a virtual family gathering on Thanksgiving, we can continue that. But it's just going to be that tight, because you can see, looking at the Thanksgiving on Thursday, and then it's a week later, that is December 3rd for the meeting, and there's a weekend in between there. This is the really rough cycle for the TAC forum that we go through when Thanksgiving ends up late. And then the pressure it puts on the agencies to try and get us numbers so that we can all have that last month and that first quarter. So with that, Madam Chair, we will most likely be in that time frame, but we will be, after this meeting, talking to the agencies and then working with you as chair to get the next meeting scheduled and set up. And I would believe then we can do that here just to let everybody know. So please try and keep those dates somewhat open in your calendars. And then also, most likely, we'll be doing it in the same format that we conducted today's meeting virtually.
Thank you. So with that, I would request assistance from broadcast services to open public comment.
Madam Chair, we usually take a 3-minute break to allow the callers time to call in. Are you wanting to do that?
If that's what we need to do, yes, I'm willing to do that.
Madam Chair, the line is up and working. However, the public comment lobby is empty at this time. There's no public comment.
Thank you. Seeing no public comment, I would move that the committee adjourns.
Thank you, Madam
everyone.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for everything you've done today and all your hard work getting us
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.